Alright, these set of notes are about fractions, reviewing what a fraction is, the parts of a fraction, and also how to find equivalent fractions and put fractions in simplest form. So first, let's look at what a fraction is. So fractions can be used to indicate part of a set or part of a whole. So you could say something along the lines of 3/4 of the class were wearing jeans, or we ate half of the pizza. So part of a set, you're talking about a specific amount out of all of the objects in the set, in this case the people in the class, or part of a whole, like what portion was eaten in the case of the pizza. The numerator is the number above the fraction bar that tells how many equal parts of the group or of the whole are being considered. Just the part that was eaten for the pizza, just the part that's wearing the jeans for the class. The denominator is the number below the fraction bar that tells how many equal parts there are in the total group or in the whole. So 3 out of every 4 of the class were wearing jeans. Probably are going to be more than 4 people in the class, but if you group them into groups of 4, 3 out of every 4 would be wearing jeans. That fraction was probably already simplified. Half of the pizza was probably in 8 slices. So 4 out of 8 were eaten, and that simplifies to 1 out of 2, 1 out of every 2. So that brings us to talking about equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions represent the same quantity. So to make equivalent fractions, you can multiply or divide the numerator and the denominator by the same non-zero number. You can't add the numerator and denominator or subtract the numerator and denominator by a number and expect it to be equivalent. It's only when we're multiplying, because we're breaking it up into smaller pieces, or we're dividing, we're grouping them together. Visually equivalent fractions are divided into more smaller pieces, yeah, like I just said. So if I had 1/2, which is that, I could break it into 4 times as many pieces. Well, let me use a different color actually. And if I break it into 4 times as many pieces, now I'm dealing with 4 out of 8. And similarly, I could have fewer larger pieces, 4/8, if I group them into fourths. I would only have 1/2 colored in. And you know my smart boards don't line up quite so right. So hopefully you can make your visual look a little bit more appropriate. A fraction is in simplest form. A lot of times when you're working with fractions, your final answer should be in simplest form, or lowest terms, or simplified, or reduced. All different kinds of terms you might have seen in the past and you might see in the future. So simplified or reduced or lowest terms. It's in simplest form when the numerator and denominator have only 1 as their common factor. You can't divide out anything more and end up with a non-complex fraction. You have to have a whole number on the top and the whole number on the bottom to have simplest form. So a fraction is in simplest form. To write a fraction in simplest form, you can divide the numerator and denominator by their greatest common factor. Hence why we just reviewed greatest common factor. So 24 and 36 have a greatest common factor of 12. So if I divide 12 out of the numerator, I get 2, and I divide 12 out of the denominator, I get 3. So 24/36 as a simplified fraction is equivalent to 2/3. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the ink and scroll the notes down. Because there's more than one way. You don't have to find the GCF. Of course, that's a nice way. That's why we review GCF. I gotta scroll over here. Sometimes people do it in multiple steps. Just like finding the GCF, you might find the GCF in multiple steps. So you can simplify in multiple steps. If the GCF is not obvious. So maybe if you're looking at 32 and 56, the only divisibility rule that seems clear and obvious is that they're both ending in an even number, 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, so therefore I can divide 2 out of both sections. And when I do that, I'm left with the next step, which is 16/28. 16/28, they're both even, they're both divisible by 2, so divide those by 2, and you're left with 8/14. Well, 8/14, those are both even, they could be divided by 2, and we'd end up with a final simplified answer of 4/7, because 4/7 does not have any additional factors I could divide out. Now looking back at this, I divided out by 2, another 2, and another 2. I divided out by 2 3 different times, so I could have initially divided out by 8. 8 would have been the greatest common factor. Another method that uses prime factorization, you know I love prime factorization, you could write the prime factorization of the numerator and the denominator and cancel factors in common. So when we simplify fractions, you're going to see us do something called simplifying or canceling out factors. So 32 is equal to 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Let's see, that's 4 times 4 is 16 times 2 is 32. And 36 is equal to 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. So essentially this prime factorization method, you look at it and you go, let's see. I could divide a 2 out of the top and a 2 out of the bottom. I could divide a second 2 out of the top and a second 2 out of the bottom. But that's the only things they have in common. So what I have left is 2 times 2 times 2 on the top, which is 8, and 3 times 3 on the bottom, which is 9. So 32 over 36 is equivalent to 8/9. It's simplified or put in reduced terms to 8/9. And that's how you would use the prime factorization method. And on your practice sheet, sometimes they will request one method over another. Usually, if it's going to request a specific thing, it's having you do the initial step of finding the GCF and then finding your simplest form. But if it doesn't specify, then you can use any of those 3 methods to put fractions in simplest form. So go ahead and try some practice.